Welcome to Receiving Noor weekly Quran study. We are continuing to study Surah Alaq with Dr. Yamina. We would like to intend this study of the Quran be a healing to our hearts and to be guidance and enlightenment for all of us, inshallah. As usual, you're welcome to join in. You're encouraged actually to join in during Dr. Yamina's sharing. And then you're also welcome to ask questions or make comments when she finishes her discourse. Jazakumullah khair, Sister Yamina.
Thank you, Isra. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So we stopped at ayah 14, if you remember. There was this description of this of human being who have been created from a clinging cloth and then taught and given knowledge through the use of the pen, and he was taught what he did not know, and then lo and behold, كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى, he transgresses all bounds and becomes arrogant whenever he believes himself to be self-sufficient. We also been told that have you considered him who tries to prevent a servant from praying? And have you considered if he were upon guidance or enjoins God consciousness? And have you considered if he denied and turned away? Does he then not see that God sees? Does he then not know that God sees? Sorry. أَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَرَى. So inshallah today we'll focus on ayah 14. I had in mind that we could do more, but I found myself the whole week I couldn't go past ayah 14. And we've seen how, in general, commentators on this part of the surah, this second part, the description of this arrogant person who imagines himself to be self-sufficient and disconnected, therefore unaware of his Rabb, has been generally, the assumption was that it was referring to Abu Jahl, and the ayat were explained accordingly, and we said that that could be, even if that were the case, still there is no name in the Quran itself, therefore it applies to everyone, even if we assume that this person who is maybe personified by Abu Jahl could be any person, anyone, and also it is referring to a potential within every one of us. And that potential could be a seed-like, or it could be a tree, and we don't want it to grow. And so we want to recognize it so that we don't let it flourish within us. When it comes to this ayah, some read it as referring to Abu Jahl again, and others, like for instance Razi, mentioned that it, although it was initially referring to Abu Jahl, it also applies to everyone who is like Abu Jahl. In the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, all of them, all these commentators, may Allah be pleased with them, Ibn Kathir does not refer to Abu Jahl in commenting on this particular ayah. He said, does he not know that Allah sees? meaning, doesn't this person who is preventing this man who is following correct guidance, doesn't this person know that Allah sees him and hears his word, and he will compensate him in full for what he has done? That's it. Usually the commentary on this ayah is very short. Generally, we're told that he, meaning Abu Jahl, thought that he was violating the messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam, but actually God was watching his actions, and the assumption is that the mushriks, the polytheists or the idolaters, believe those who commit shirk, but usually the assumption is that these mushriks are the mushriks in Mecca, believed in a main god, but Abu Jahl, although he believed in the main god, and although he knew that God sees, he was so arrogant, he even ignored that God was watching him because he did not fear God. So this is what, this is pretty much the summary of everything. The main sources, of course, not everything, but the main sources, which probably will be more tafsirs that are older tafsirs, so that they had people, they are known enough so that they can be compiled, because newer commentaries may not be available to everyone. Not everyone knows about them. So the ayah says, does he then not know that God sees? And this he, okay, I'll come back to the he. So in light of how we've been reading this surah so far, and we can say in light of how we've been reading all the surahs up to now, inshallah, meaning we've been reading them as a message of guidance from our merciful Rabb to us here and now. It's a message that shows us the path out of darkness, the darkness of unknowing, the darkness of mindlessness, the darkness of ghafla, the darkness of shirk, even if it is, hidden and unintended. So this guidance shows us the path out of that darkness into the light. So it's a message of good news, a message of healing, as we're told in the Quran itself. And so bearing that in mind, this is how I understand this ayah so far, bi'idhnillah. It doesn't mean that this is the only way to understand it, or what we understand does not limit the ayah, inshallah. It's only a small, tiny, little thing from this infinite sea of wisdom, because each ayah points to, it's an ayah. It indicates something. It's not the sea itself. It indicates the source of all wisdom. So, of course, what it indicates is going to be infinite. And so, as I sometimes say, like even the same person may benefit in different ways and sees different aspects of this ayah in different situations at different times when we have different needs. So just so that we are clear that what we understand is not this ayah means this and full stop. No. This is one of the meanings it is indicating, inshallah. So logically, there are two possible answers to this question, although it looks like a metaphorical question, but questions, it's like a yes or no. Does he not know that God sees? So either no, he doesn't know that God sees, or yes, he does know that God still sees. And if he knows, it means he knows that God sees him, and still he rebels, he doesn't care. The second option doesn't make much sense to me. I'll explain why. Because knowing is not something theoretical only. It has to also be experiential. Otherwise, it's information, but it's not knowing, it's not ilm. So in order to know, there is need for intention from our part to realize something and to know it. Just because we heard something, for instance, we heard that God sees. It does not mean much unless we confirm it. Just because I heard that God sees and I was not bothered enough to consider it and either confirm it or reject it, deny it. Just because I did not deny it doesn't mean that I truly understand what it means and I know that God sees. In order to know that God sees, we have to reach some level of yaqeen, even if it is at least ilm al-yaqeen, at least even if it's not knowing through living, but at least through knowing at least. And as far as I understand, the answer is that such person described in the previous ayat. Remember, this person is described in ayat 6, 7, 9, 10, and 13. And such a person who we are told transgresses all bound, كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى, someone who is rebellious, who is transgressing, who is arrogant. In ayah 7, someone, whenever he believes himself to be self-sufficient, this person imagines himself to be self-sufficient, is unaware or does not recognize his connection to his Rabb. In ayah 9, we're told, have you ever seen him who tries to prevent a servant from praying? 9 and 10. And in 13, we were told, أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. Have you seen if he denied and turned away? So someone who is denying, this is even a further step, and turning away from the truth. He's not only ignoring, not bothered by confirming it, but not denying it, but he is even going a step further and denying and turning away. I personally can't see how such a person can know that God sees. So I believe that the object of this question is the audience, which is, in this case, it's us. We're the ones listening here. So although the ayah is referring to this person, but God is speaking about this person to me. I'm the one who is learning something from this. And the fact that it is question, personally, it made me stop and think. In the beginning, I was thinking, does he know, does he not know? And then I started thinking, okay, what does it mean that God sees? So that I can say, so I can decide whether he knows or not, whether I know or not. It's not so obvious. Traditionally, it's easy because the answer would be, of course we know. Do we know that God sees? Well, of course we know. How? Usually they will say with dalil أن الله تعالى قال في قرآنه الكريم, and the evidence is that God Almighty says in his noble Quran that he is Basir, and you will be given an ayah or many ayat. And there are many ayat saying that God indeed, he is basir, he is seeing. But then we can ask the same question we started with: how do we know that he is basir? How do we know the new ayah is true? This reasoning is called circular reasoning. It's logically, it's erroneous. It's a fallacy. It's a logical fallacy. Why? Because in a reasoning, in a circular reasoning, what the reasoner is doing is you begin with what you are seeking to demonstrate, and then you use it to conclude. So, of course, logically, it can be valid, because if the premise is true, the conclusion will have to be true. It must be true. It's like someone says God exists. Why? Because it says so in the scripture, in the Quran, for instance. It is, if you are a believer, let's say, and you know that, yes, God exists, and that the scripture says so, everything is valid and everything is, how do you say, correct. However, the reasoning is false, because you're not demonstrating anything. You're saying God exists. Why? Because it says so in the scripture. But why should I believe in the scripture? Because it is the word of God. Now, if someone is not already a believer in God, already has accepted the scripture, it doesn't mean anything. If you have someone who is new, like the Prophet ﷺ, the people around him, the Sahaba, the companions, they did not know this is the word of God. They came to confirm it. They learned from the Quran, they learned how to confirm it. But I don't think they were told. Otherwise, there would have been no problem in the beginning. Some people studied with the Prophet ﷺ and believed, and some did not. So this is not a reasoning, and this is not what we are taught in the Quran. This is not what we learn from the Quran. We never told in the Quran, it is because I say so. There is always an invitation to reflect, to ask questions. We are encouraged to seek the evidences in order to confirm the answers and have tasdeeq. So tasdeeq is key. We need to confirm. And in order to confirm, we have to have evidences. And this is exactly what the Quran does. It furnishes us, it gives us, shows us where the evidence is and how to reach the evidence. Otherwise, we'd remain in a vicious circle of taqlid, of imitation. And imitation in matters of iman, in matters of belief, are not accepted, because that would not be belief, that would be just parroting and repeating what someone else says. So our question now is, do we know that God sees? How do we know that God sees? What are our evidences? Personally, I believe that this is a very, very important question. And it deserves that we pause, it deserves that we reflect and answer it with conviction, that we find the answer and that we are convinced. And only then that will increase our iman. We get to know God from a new perspective. God as the seeing, as al-Basir, inshallah. And also, let's keep in mind that knowing God sees us is part of ihsan. So it's not like something to be taken for granted. I mean, how can it apply to Abu Jahl, like an Abu Jahl-like person, an arrogant person like Abu Jahl, when it is part of ihsan? Someone who is arrogant, someone who imagines himself to be self-sufficient, someone who even denies and turns away from the truth, for instance, the truth of his being not self-sufficient, or of his being totally dependent on his Rabb. How can he know that God sees? Even if he says it with words, he does not really know it. He doesn't know what it means. If you remember in the hadith of Gabriel, the famous hadith, when we are told what the angel Jibril alayhi salam comes and meets the Prophet والسلام, together with few companions, and he asks few questions. The first one was, what is Islam? What is Iman? And each time the Prophet والسلام, answers. And the third question is, what is Ihsan? And the Prophet والسلام, replied, to worship God as though you see him. And you cannot, if you cannot see him, it means if you have not reached that level where you can see him in everything, you can see the face of God in everything, then at least you have to know that he sees you. So this is the threshold, the beginning of ihsan is when we start living with the consciousness, with the certainty that God sees us. Of course, better is when we also see him, which means we see his face, we see the face of everything that looks to him, that looks to his beautiful names in everything. So you see, it's not something that we can take for granted, because it is a step in ihsan. So again, I repeat, knowing is not having heard something and not denying it. It is not a mere piece of information, although it may start with it, but that's not what it is. It's much more. So how do we confirm that God indeed sees? We are not told he sees us. The ayah says, Anna Allah yara. God sees. When it has no object, it means he sees everything, including us, of course. But he doesn't see us only, he sees everything. So we go to the passages of the Quran. We are not quoting the Quran as evidence. We will go to the passages of Quran that teach us how to confirm that God sees. So we're still using the same ayat, but not taking them at face value and saying, God says he sees, therefore he sees. No. In which context, how the, usually, especially when it comes to God's names, they come at the end of the ayah. So they are a conclusion. What is it told before, so that we follow the steps one by one and we come to that conclusion? And this is what we've been doing since we started reading and reflecting on the Quran together. We follow the Quran. We do not, we try not to impose our whatever we learned here and there on the Quran, but on the contrary, we try to listen to the guidance of the Quran and use it to rearrange what we know, to revise, rearrange, revise maybe. Look at what we thought we knew and question it and filter it and put order in it, inshallah. Or use it in a way that becomes, that leads to haqq, to the truth, and does not pull us away from the reality, so we are stuck in the things themselves. So when we look at the Quran, okay, so what was I saying? So we want to confirm, we want to confirm that God indeed sees. So what we do, we go to the passages of the Quran that teach us that God indeed sees. How? Through ayat. Ayat in the creation, not ayat in the Quran, because that will be a vicious circle. Because, lo and behold, the ayat of the Quran always refer to the world, because the ayat in the world are the evidences that we can see, that we can observe, that we can observe, make mushahada, that we can witness, that we can make shahada, and therefore that we can confirm, we can make tasdiq, because they are things that we see, we observe, we interact with, we experience. It's part of our world. So the evidences are in the world, and there are usually two types of evidences, as we are told in the Quran, fil afaqi wa fi anfusihim. The ayat are in the outer world and within themselves. So there are the afaqi evidence in the outer world and within ourselves. So one of God's beautiful names is Basir, seeing, and it's repeated many, many times in the Quran. Another is Raqib, not as frequent. So we'll focus on Basir, inshallah. Raqib is even Raqib comes after referring to creation. So God creates, and at the end we are told He is Raqib. But Raqib is a little bit different. It's like He's watching over you. So I will, inshallah, focus on Basir, which is derived from the root Basara. And Basir is used for God and for human beings. And as a verb, it's used for human beings. We are told that God gave us Basar, السمع والبصر. In relation to God, only Basir as either a noun or an adjective is used. The verb is not used. The other word for seeing that is used in Ayah 14 that we are reading today is Ra'a. Ra'a is used for human beings and for God, but for God it is used only as a verb. For human beings, it's used as a verb and everything. And both are related.
Yamina, could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Do you mean it's this is the usage in the Quran, that it's never used as verb? Basir?
Yeah. It's used, of course, yes, because it's used as verb for human beings in the Quran. Of course, I'm referring to the Quran.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, both words refer to seeing and to sight. Ra'a is from Ra'a we have ru'ya, the noun or the masdar is ru'ya, and which means vision, and it could mean the faculty of seeing, of sight, like when I'm not, how do you say, we're not intending to do anything and we see, that seeing is ra'a, as far as we are concerned. It also refers to the ability to perceive and understand. That's why here it was used as alam tara, and sometimes it's translated as don't you consider, don't you understand. And it is also vision in the sense of something you see in a dream or in a vision. So you can't use basar for instance, something referring to a dream. We use ru'ya ra'a, we ra'aytu fil manami, but you can't say use basar. So ru'ya is more, I'm trying to understand the difference, seeing an image and form with or without the eye, like in a dream. Basar, so I said it can't be used for a dream. Basar is seeing like with the intellect first, maybe also with the heart. So it has basira is insight. Then possibly with the eye. You may not. It may not be something that you see with the eye. It includes what can be seen with the eye and what can be seen with the heart and with the intellect. So a physically blind person can be described as basir or mubsir. Mubsir is like seeing, because in that case we'll be talking about seeing without eyes. Although when you say mubsir, you could think someone seeing with eyes as well. So basar also has a connotation of seeing clearly, like with bayan, with clarity, and distinguishing things in their reality. So it can also refer to seeing with the heart, like I said, with insight. It's like the eye of wisdom, one sense of it. And so when we have the name of God, Basir, it is understood as the one who sees everything, the seen and the unseen, the apparent and the hidden. That's not the case with Ru'ya. Basir is more in-depth, is more comprehensive. In any case, God describes himself as, for instance, Sami'un Basir many times. He is all hearing, all seeing. And we're also told repeatedly that he gives us a sam'a wal basara. He gives us hearing and sight. So you can see the parallel. إِنَّهُ هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. He is the all hearing, all seeing. He gives hearing and sight. So from this parallel, we understand that it is through our hearing and sight that we can confirm that whoever is making us, is creating us with the ability to hear and see, our Rabb is the hearing and seeing, since he's the source of our hearing and seeing right here and now. And I always like to emphasize the here and now, because if we imagine that, as we often do when we are in a state of ghafla, when we don't live intentionally with consciousness, it seems to us, I'm talking about believers, of course, that we were created at the beginning, at birth, and at birth he gave us hear and sight, and then we don't think about it, as though he left us, as though right now we're the ones hearing and seeing, we're the one growing, getting old, whatever. That's it. It's only one point in time. That's a a deluded perception. It is, how do you say, distorted because of ghafla. In that state of being, we are not able to witness and confirm that our Rabb hears us and sees us here, now, always. Because it seems like my hearing and my sight has nothing to do with him. I am the one hearing and seeing right now, although somehow he gave it to me. People usually don't stop and even question, what does it mean that he gave it to me? If it is mine now, might as well always be mine. If it was not mine, at what point, how could it be mine right now? When we stop and when we pause, then we break up that delusion of ghafla and we realize that it can be taken anytime, as we are told in the Quran. Not only for hearing and sight and seeing, but for many, many things. Anything that can be taken away from me anytime cannot be mine. If I have no control over it, how could it be mine? It is a trust. It is given. I am using it in that sense. Yes. In that sense only. So we can see how this reasoning is everywhere in the Quran, either explicitly or implicitly. And that's where we learned it from. In Surah Al-Balad, for instance, which is Surah 90, in Ayah 7, we're told, أَيَحْسَبُ أَن لَمْ يَرَهُ أَحَدٌ? Does he then think that no one sees him? And the answer is given in Ayah 8. The answer has the evidence in it. You know what the answer is? Have we not given him 2 eyes? أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ? If we gave you the eyes, how can you think that the one who gave you your eyes and your seeing doesn't see? And then it carries on. وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ. Can you see how the moment we ask the question, then we start noticing that the answer is there. There is a question. Does he think that no one sees him? Answer, have we not given him 2 eyes? The answer has the evidence. The evidence is something that not only I can see in other creatures, other living beings, not only human beings, animals as well, but also I can experience, I can reflect, how do I see? Who sees when I see? And the more we reflect, the more we will, inshallah, prostrate in amazement at the gift and in humility at we appreciate that seeing is a miracle. At the same time, we don't understand how we see. We just, it is done unto us and that's it. We appreciate it, we love it, we cannot imagine being deprived from it. It's something so precious. But what is it? We don't know. How do we see? We don't know. We are made to see. We are told in Surah Al-Mujadila, which is Surah 58, in the first ayah of this Surah, Surah 58, God has indeed heard the words of her who pleads with you concerning her husband and complains unto God. So God heard her words. And then we are told, and God hears what you both have to say. Truly, God is all hearing, all seeing. This Sami'un Basir is repeated a lot. So you see, and in the second part, it says God, Wallahu yasma'u. It doesn't say Wallahu sami'a, like it could be something to do with the past. No, yasma'u. Yasma'u means all the time. He hears. God hears what you both have to say, and not because God is all hearing. It is true that he hears because he is all hearing, but in the first step, I still don't know that he's all hearing. It's because we can hear each other. She can complain, she can speak, and the Prophet ﷺ can hear her. It's because I speak and people can hear me. They speak and I hear them, that I understand that, of course, he hears. So in order to confirm that he hears, I have to reflect on my own hearing, my own seeing. Because if I am the hearer, the seer, this is what we imagine when we are in ghafla, that's what it means. That to be istaghna, to imagine to be self-sufficient. It's not like people think that they are self-sufficient financially or something. That's one of them. But there are other things that are more, how do you say, existential. If I imagine that my hearing and seeing belong to me, it means my hearing, it means I am imagining that I am self-sufficient as far as hearing and seeing is concerned. And therefore, I cannot know and confirm that God is all hearing, all seeing. Because in my hearing, I don't see him. I don't find him. I cannot witness to him. We're also told many times, إِنَّهُ بِعِبَادِهِ خَبِيرٌ بَصِيرٌ. He is well aware, all seeing of his creation, his servants. And these ayats are usually all related to first the creation, and then the conclusion is he is Khabirun Basir. Khabir is aware and seeing. So for instance, in one ayah we're told, if God were to grant his plentiful provision to his creatures, لِعِبَادِهِ actually, to his ibad, the plural of abd, they would act insolently on earth, but he sends down in due measure whatever he will, for he is well aware, all seeing. Basirun bil ibad also is, and because the word ibad is used, it means it is related to ubudiyah and referring to rububiyah. And it means to the extent that I'm aware of my ubudiyah, I'll be able to witness that my Rabb is aware, my Rabb is Basir, he is seeing. We're told that God sees because he knows. He knows the unseen, for instance. In Surah Al-Hujurat, Surah 49, Ayah 18, we're told, truly, God knows the unseen of the heavens and the earth, and God sees all that you do. And this seeing of all that you do is repeated again and again. Wallahu basirun bima ta'malun. Inna Allah ya'lamu ghayba as-samawati wal ard. Wallahu basirun bima ta'lamun. Ta'malun, sorry. So how do we know that God sees all that we do? Because he knows everything. How does he know? Because he sees everything. But the seeing is not our seeing, of course. Our seeing is very limited. His seeing is the ghaib, the unseen. He sees the seen and the unseen. And actually the unseen is the, how do you say, is what matters, because everything proceeds from the unseen. What we see right now in the world is always, because everything is transient, it's always flowing. So the source where everything is flowing from is the unseen, flowing from and going to. In this world, things remain very short time, and they pass. They come and they pass. They come and they pass. Where are they coming from? From a source, an unseen source. He knows the unseen of the heavens and the earth, everything. So, of course, if he knows, it's because he sees. And how do we confirm that he knows? How do we know that he really knows? Well, we are told that in various passages in the Quran, but for instance in Surah Al-Mulk, because we studied Surah Al-Mulk, so I had that in mind. Remember, we studied it recently. Surah Al-Mulk is Surah 67. In Ayah 14, we are told, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقْ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. How could it be that the one who has created should not know? Is it possible that the one who creates doesn't know? أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقْ. Shouldn't the one who creates know? Of course. Can you make anything without knowing?
It's just a simple analogy. If you made a cake and somebody says, what is in it? I don't know. If you really made the cake.
Then immediately, if you don't know, we'll say, okay, you didn't. Just tell us where you got it from. Yeah. Right? Clearly, if you made it, then you know. So, can you see how nicely it unfolds? It says, is it possible? وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. And he alone is unfathomable, all aware. He's aware of everything. He knows everything. And actually, from the fact that he creates, we can deduce that he knows and that he sees as well. As we are told, for instance, in Surah Al-Hadid, Surah 57, Ayah 4, we are told, it is he, meaning God, who has created the heavens and the earth in 6 aeons. And he is established on the throne of his almightiness. He knows all that enters the earth and all that comes out of it. Why does he know? We know because he is the one who creates. First it says he has created, then it says he knows, and then he says, and he is with you wherever you may be. If he creates and knows, of course, wherever I am, he is with me, because when I see, it's his seeing. When I speak, it's I am being made to speak. And then, Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. Now we can understand. And God sees all that you do. I'm telling you, this is repeated a lot. God sees all that you do. He creates, he knows, therefore he is with you wherever you are, and he sees everything. Actually, it's more than just seeing, but it starts with seeing. That's the how do you say, the threshold of ihsan. Because after that, we'll realize that it's not only that he sees, but everything. As we are told in the Qudsi hadith, when I love him, when my servant, my abd, come closer to me, and I love him, and when I love him, I am his hearing with which he hears, his sight with which he sees, his hand with which he seizes, his foot with which he walks. So it's more than seeing, but seeing is the beginning when we realize that he sees. In Surah Al-Mulk again, Surah 67, Ayah 19, we are told, have they then never not seen, Alam Yaraw, have they not seen? Here the seen has both meanings, seeing and thinking, considering. Have they never not seen the birds above them spreading their wings and drawing them in? None but the Rahman, the most compassionate, upholds them. Truly, he sees all things. Innahu bikulli shay'in basir. How can we confirm the conclusion of this ayah? The ayah shows us, gives us the evidence. The evidence, go out, look at the birds. It says to look. Go and look, and you will see how they spread. And the ra'a here, it's not saying unzur. Unzur is look. It's saying awalam yaraw. Yaraw has more than just looking. It has also considering, understanding, reflecting. And so when you reflect on how they can stay up there, you will understand that this is rahmah. None other than the Rahman, the most compassionate, can uphold them there. For truly, he sees all things. And if he's the one doing it, of course he sees. And of course, I'm not, because we don't have time, but I invite you to take some of these ayahs, for instance, this ayah, and why particularly the seeing is emphasized. Because if he creates, it means he sees. It means he knows. It means he hears. It means so many things. It means he has power. It means he has wisdom. But in some particular cases, one name is mentioned. It doesn't mean that the other names are not there, but that name is mentioned there for a particular reason. There is wisdom in that too. So these are the signs, and the signs, the evidences are in the creation. So we can either witness them, see them, observe them in the creation out there, afaq, they are the afaqi evidences. Or there are also the signs that looks to us. When we consider our own seeing has two aspects. One is afaqi. We can observe sight, we can observe seeing, the eye, either of human being or other living beings. We can study it and learn from it and realize that whoever is creating this thing, this piece of flesh, and making it see, is the source of all seeing. He is all seeing. And we can also reflect on the same eye, the same vision and seeing from within, and it will be an anfusi evidence. We can reflect on the process of seeing from within ourselves and ask questions like we are told in the Quran, when we are told, is it you who does this, or are we the doers? Can you make this, or are we the ones who make it? We will take those questions and apply them to something else. For instance, is it me who sees when I see? Just as we are told, this is a pattern that is from the Quran. I just replaced the verb. Is it me who sees? There we are asked, is it you who does this and this, or is it God? And what comes to mind immediately is, the answer is, for instance, in In the Quran, we are told, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. In Surah Al-Anfal, you did not throw when you threw, but it is God who threw. We can take the verb throwing and use another verb. It applies to all verbs, to all actions, because we do not and cannot and have nothing in ourselves to create any action, whether seeing or talking or walking or even breathing and living and being. So we can confirm that he is all-seeing, that he sees everything, that he sees all what we do, when we confirm and we grasp that we do not create our actions. Because if I assume without reflecting that I am the creator of my actions, how can he know I am creating it? Like the simple example of the cake. But is it true that we choose our actions? We choose what to do. But of course, our choice is limited. I can't choose to fly because I'm not made to fly. I can choose only within a narrow spectrum. And because I can choose, however narrow, even if it's between two things, the moment I choose, I become responsible. But it does not mean that we create. We do not create, we cannot create. We are being created together with our actions. In the Quran, we are told, لا يخلقون شيئا وهم يخلقون. We are told, do not worship things that cannot create anything because they themselves are being created. This ayah, it's a repeated ayah, but you can find it, for instance, in Surah Al-Nahl, Surah 16, ayah 20. This ayah is saying that anything that is created cannot create. Why? Because things are being created. There is nothing that was created and now it is not. How can someone that is created can remain, sustain its existence, remain in existence and maintain it without any help from outside? That is the delusion of the one who istaghna, who imagines himself to be self-sufficient. There is no self-sufficiency. Everything is at some level made of atoms, for instance. Atoms cannot subsist from one instant to the other if they don't remain in motion. They have nothing in them that keeps them in motion. Someone is holding them in existence. There is nothing in me that makes me sustain my breathing, my life. Someone is sustaining my life. Someone is breathing life into me and sustaining it. It depends on how you look at it and how it's two different ways of saying the same thing. So لا يخلقون شيئا وهم يخلقون. They cannot and do not create anything. Why? Because they are themselves being created. It applies to all creatures, to all created beings, including ourselves. And if we don't apply this to ourselves, we fall into the person we are talking about. The person who imagines himself to be self-sufficient. Another argument in the Quran is whoever, well, have I mentioned it? Whoever creates knows. I think I mentioned it. But there are other passages in the Quran. For instance, in Surah Al-An'am, So there are two things. He creates, therefore he knows. He creates seeing creatures. It's even a clearer sign and evidence that he is all-seeing. He knows and he sees. In Surah Al-An'am, which is Surah 6 from Ayah 102 to 105, we are told, such is God, your Rabb, your sustainer. ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ. There is no God except Him, خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. He is the creator of all things. Therefore, worship Him alone. For it is He who has everything in His care. No human vision, no human, لا تدركه الأبصار, no sight, no human sight can encompass Him, can grasp Him, whereas He grasps and encompasses وهو يدرك الأبصار, all human sight. For He alone is unfathomable, all aware. وهو اللطيف الخبير. That we've seen repeated again and again. So just it makes sense that we cannot, because we are, the first ayah says that He is the creator of everything, so therefore worship Him. اعبدوه. So اعبدوه is not only worship like in English worship. اعبدوه, it means first it has to start with the acknowledgement, with the consciousness of being abd, because ibadah is not only the motions. For instance, I can be doing all the motions of the salat, but if I do not perceive myself as abd to a certain extent, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be 100%, of course, to that extent it becomes ibadah. If someone fasts but does not believe in God, we don't call that ibadah. So the fact is not only that the person is doing the action, but the awareness, the consciousness that comes with it. So here, when we say u'budu, worship is limited. U'budu is much more. I'budu, it means become abd. It means, if I am abd, it means He's my Rabb. And it talked about ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ. That is, such is God, your Rabb. So, and He is خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. So I have to recognize Him as my Rabb. It means I to the extent I realize that I'm abd. And how do I realize that I'm abd? Because to the extent that I realize that He is خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. خَالِقُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ is not only outside. Actually, I can confirm it in the outer world to the extent that I confirm it within me. Because if seeing and hearing is mine, I never questioned it, I take it for granted, then all animals and insects and all beings that see and hear, I am, without saying it and articulating it, I am by default implicitly implying that they are all hearing and seeing themselves. So you see, it depends on the keys within me, how I view me, in my being abd. U'buduh, that's why it says u'buduh. It's a command, because that will open up the key, that will open the doors of all the names of God, of all the reality of this life, the reality of who I am, what life is about, this world and akhirah. All the doors will start opening, inshallah. And then to that extent, I will realize that yes, my human, my basar is given, an absar, like my sight is given to me through my sight, when to the extent that I use my sight as a key to realize that He's the giver of sight, to that extent I can confirm ayah 103 of Surah 6. And then he's al-Latif al-Khabir. Of course he's al-Latif al-Khabir. He's unfathomable, because the more I reflect on my seeing and hearing, or here it's on my seeing, the more I am totally, it's beyond my grasping. Let alone Allah's, God's seeing. Even the limited vision that we have, we don't truly understand its nature. We just experience it. We just see, but we don't really know what it is. And when we try to know what it is, we just go into sajda. We say he is al-Latif, he is beyond, he is unfathomable. He is all aware, he knows everything, I know nothing. And it increases my ubudiyah. It increases my awareness of who I am as totally dependent on his gifting, his sustaining. And then we are told, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ بَصَائِرُ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ, means of insight. This insight, this basair, is insight, is like seeing not with the eye, but with the heart, with the mind, with everything. That's the insight of Iman. And the means of this insight is the guidance through the Quran, the guidance through the ayat and evidences in the creation. For instance, our seeing is an ayah, and therefore a means of insight has now come onto you from your Rabb. Whoever therefore chooses to see, not see with the eyes, everyone sees, even cats and dogs see. Not in that sense, to see in the, remember, in the basira, in the insight, to see the truth, the reality of what's going on, the reality of things, does so for his own good. And whoever chooses to remain blind, and again, blind here is not physical blindness, but the blindness of the heart, of insight, does so to his own hurt. And say unto the blind of heart, I am not your keeper. And thus do we give many facets to our signs, and to the end that I might say, you have taken well to heart, and what you might make it clear, that you might make it clear unto people, لِقَوْمٍ لِيُبَيِّنَهُ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. And this is how we make everything clear unto people who know. Only then there is knowledge, because otherwise people have information, but that is not knowledge. That's why Abu Jahl was known as the father of wisdom, and when he insisted on denying the guidance, he became known as the father of ignorance. His knowledge was the same, but if what he knew, his knowledge, was not a means of basair, was not a means of seeing the truth as it is, the reality as it is. And the first reality is that we are totally dependent on another's sustaining, even if we don't know him as Rabb in the beginning, that we are not self-sufficient. Then that knowledge is ignorance. And in all this is remembering that everything is transient. Remember, transience means everything in a state of flowing, in a state of returning to its source. Wherever it came from, it is going there. When we forget this reality, when we forget that everything is in a state of returning, therefore we are also in a state of returning. When we forget that life is transient, and therefore we forget our being abd, because we only are aware of our ubudiyah to the extent that we are aware that we are being sustained in life right now. My seeing, my hearing, my speaking, is all being, my breathing is being sustained right now. I cannot do it myself. I have no control over it. I can stop. I have only the choice to stop and speak. I have the choice to close my eyes, or when they are open, they see. I am not making them see. If they stop seeing, I have no way of making them see. So when we forget this, when we forget that we are abd, we forget our ubudiyah, and that is directly related to forgetting that everything is transient, because we take it for granted as if I am here in the world and I exist, I am, that's it. I don't even question it. How are you? You're being changed, everything is changing all the time. Transience equals someone is bringing things into existence, taking them away and sustaining them here and now. So when we forget about transience, which is the biggest reality of life that cannot be missed if we have a little bit of intention, when we ignore that life is transient, there is no way we can live and witness, live our ubudiyah and witness the rububiyah here and now. And we won't see that everything is in a state of returning to its source, to wherever it came from. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And as a consequence, there is no way to witness who our Rabb is. That, for instance, that he is all-seeing, that he knows, that he sees, that he hears. And that's why in Surah Al-Inshiqaq, which is Surah 84, in ayah 14 and 15, we are told, behold, he never thought that he would have to return. Indeed, his Rabb, his sustainer, did see all that was in him. بَلَا إِنَّ رَبَّهُ كَانَ بِهِ بَصِيرٌ. And again, the word here is basir. God, his sustainer, his Rabb, was all seeing of him. It means, and this ayah is like, it's saying, God sees you. Wake up from your delusion. Don't you realize that? And he's saying he never thought he would have to return to God. And we think, oh, wait a minute, like, do I have to always remember that I have to return to God? That translates into something else. Everything is passing means everything is returning to God. And when we focus on everything is passing, then we realize that everything is coming anew again and again. Then we will start witnessing the rububiyah, and we witness it within ourselves, and we start witnessing the names of God. That's how we will see the face of God in everything. That's the only way we can see the face of everything, God in everything. If we forget about transience, we can't see that everything is returning to Him, then we cannot know God as our Rabb, and therefore we cannot truly experience life as abd, as ubudiyah, or very little, to the extent that we are aware of the transience. So you can see how very important it is. And when we start seeing the face of God in everything, when we start seeing how everything is mirroring the beautiful names of God, then we will start witnessing that He is all-seeing, not only through our own sight and seeing, but also through our doing. He sees whatever we do because I am not the one doing it. It is done unto me. Whoever is doing it unto me, He knows, He sees, no wonder, of course He does. And then we can confirm and say, Sadaqallahu al-Azim. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Thank you.
Thank you. Jazakumullah khair. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment at this time? Brothers or sisters, anyone is welcome. People are typing Jazakallah khair and thank you. Looks like there are no questions or comments at this time. So then we will stop here. Jazakallah khair. Sister Yamina, as usual. Allah bless you.
Thank you.
you.